For my Genius Hour project, I chose to research stars and constellations. So some basic information on stars. The age, distribution, and compositions of the stars in a galaxy trace the history and the evolution of a galaxy. And stars are responsible for the manufacture and distribution of heavy elements such as carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. And the study of life, birth, and death of stars is what we call astronomy. And here I have a little equation. So clouds and dust in space equals stars. So stars are made up of space dust and space clouds. So here's some information on star formation. So like I said before, stars are made out of clouds and dust in space, and turbulence deep within these clouds gives rise to knots with sufficient mass that the gas and dust begin to collapse under its own gravitational attraction. And as the cloud collapses, the material at the center begins to heat up and forms a protostar. The hot core begins gathering dust and gas, but not all of this material will be used. The remaining dust can turn into planets, asteroids, comets, or will just remain as dust. In January 2004, James McNeill discovered a small nebula in the constellation of Orion and found that the brightness of a star can vary. And it was discovered that the interaction between the star's magnetic field and the surrounding gas causes episodic increases in brightness. Some information on main sequence stars. So main sequence stars fuse hydrogen atoms to form helium atoms in their cores. And a star the size of the sun requires about 50 million years to mature. So after 50 million years, it'll leave its main sequence. So the outflow of energy from the central regions of the star provides the pressure necessary to keep the star from collapsing under its own weight and the energy by which it shines. There's a wide span of luminosities and color, and stars that are called red dwarfs have 10% of the mass of the sun, and they're the most numerous in the universe, so they're what you see the most. And they have lifespans of tens of billions of years. And the hypergiants are 100 times more massive than the sun, so really, really big. And they have lifetimes of a few million years. And they're very rare now, but they were very common in ancient times. And down here, you can see there's a star called VY Canis Majoris, and it has a comparison to the sun. And as you can see, it's a lot bigger than the sun, and the sun's pretty huge. So VY Canis Majoris is pretty big. Moving on to constellations. So a constellation is a group of stars which form a pattern in the night sky. You can only see them really at night. And that group of stars is called an asterism. But the official definition is an area of the sky with defined boundaries, all stars and any other objects within that boundary. There's 88 official constellations according to NASA, and some constellations are only visible in the northern hemisphere, while others are only visible in the southern hemisphere. So it really depends on where you are in the world that you can see different constellations. And some constellations can also be seasonal, so some you can only see in the summer, spring, winter, fall. And the sun is not part of a constellation on Earth that we know, but it could be part of one from another planet. So now for some history of constellations. This was probably my favorite part of this project. The history of constellations kind of intrigued me to research this topic just because I wanted to know where constellations came from, where they derived from. For as long as mankind has existed, it's likely that we have always recognized patterns in the sky. And some European cave paintings date back to over 10,000 years ago and show the marks of familiar star formations that we know as constellations today. And the first official records of constellations was 3,000 years ago by the Babylonians, which was an ancient civilization that is now modern-day Iraq. The 12 signs of zodiac are based on their observations and those of their predecessors. In the 4th century BC, these zodiacal constellations and others recorded by Babylonians were introduced into ancient Greek culture by the astronomer Eudoxus of Cnidos. So about 500 years later, a Greek-Roman scientist named Claudius Ptolemy listed all 48 constellations in his book Almagest. Ptolemy was also a mathematician and a writer. So this book Almagest, that he kept all the constellations, was kind of the basis for all the 88 that we have today. And the 48 constellations and the names he gave them still exist today and are the basis for these. So most constellations were named before recorded history, and people of different cultures identified groupings of stars in the sky with gods, goddesses, animals, and subjects of their stories, and the original names came from the Greeks. You'll often hear a lot of constellations associated with Greek mythology. So this was actually an activity from Mr. Welty's astronomy class, but I tested it out. So basically, we were given just a model of stars, a grouping of stars, and you had to create your own constellations, kind of look at it from different perspectives. And this constellation is actually the Big Dipper, is how we see it from Earth, but the point of this activity is that from different planets or different views, you can see it as different things. So the grouping of stars didn't move at all, but as I went around, you could create different constellations. So here I have the tadpole, and then I shifted a little more, and I have the fish, and shifted the last time, and I had a giraffe. So it just shows that from different parts of the world or in different parts of the universe, you can see stars in a different way and create your own patterns. So this is a photo of Earth and kind of just like a map of how you can see constellations throughout. And this kind of goes back to my last point of how it really depends on where you're standing that you can see different ones. But this is just like a generalized thing. Like I said before, some you can only see in the northern hemisphere, some you can only see in the south, and when you change your views, they kind of look a little different, but some more standardized ones like the Big Dipper are easier to find, and you can see it pretty much anywhere around here. So these are my sources. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope you learned a lot. Thanks.